of Black Americans to provide a workforce for America going forward into the future. Immigrants are coming here to work and become rich. Many of them have a better chance of doing this than we who are born in this country because they understand that by holding on to their group identity, they can become powerful. Black America Needs Help. The rap song Headed for Self-Destruction was released in 1989. Some 30 years plus later, the destruction of Black America has indeed become a reality. In 1989, when the song Headed for Self-Destruction was released, crack cocaine was becoming the real rage in Harlem. As crack spread out across America with a vengeance, it would sap the last vestiges of self-respect from Black Americans. Crack would change the character of Black America and make us a people unrecognizable from the people who we were just 20 years before. As a group, we have been conditioned for the last 30, 40 years to abandon any ideas of group progress that we may have had in the 60s and 70s. By the end of the 1980s and the beginning of the 1990s, it was clear that Black Americans had become an every man for themselves people, living in an every man for himself culture. So naturally today, we as Black Americans have little or no racial loyalty. We have no code of honor that can be relied on as we interact with one another. As we have been trained carefully to devalue our own existence, it should be no surprise that fatherhood has been vanishing from the Black community since the 1960s. Our children are not inspired by the promises of education because the Black home has been in crisis mode for decades. So today in 2023, we see passport brothers and divest sisters making it clear that there is no future in Black American male-female relationships. This is a tragic development because it solidifies the inevitable death of Black America, the downsizing of Black America, as we continue to demonstrate how thoroughly we hate ourselves. We see folks lining up at the border. In my view, there is no accident that there are millions of people being invited to come into this country. They cross the border every day. The powers that be are telling us that we have no confidence in the ability of Black Americans to provide a workforce for America going forward into the future. Immigrants are coming here to work and become rich. Many of them have a better chance of doing this than we who are born in this country because they understand that by holding on to their group identity, they can become powerful as they work hard in this country and send monies back to their homelands. They understand that by maintaining their culture and keeping their group tight and practicing group economics, they can become rich. So if you're sitting out there, Miss Black America, Mr. Black America, what do you have in mind as a strategy to prevent the total elimination of Black people as a group in America? The reality is that the abortion lobby has been stalking pregnant Black women with a vengeance for the last 40 years. Since our emancipation as slaves, all kinds of eugenic schemes have been utilized to stop the growth of Black America. Cultural engineers who have used behaviorism to shape the taste and appetites of the Black community started out claiming to only seek to prevent teenage pregnancy. But ultimately, they used every trick in the book to end any pregnancy by a Black woman. I've heard the frightening statistic that over 40% of the hysterectomies done in America were performed and conducted on Black women. Black women only represent 7% of the American population. Along with this, radical feminism has completely convinced Black women that there is no Black-white struggle, but it's a woman's struggle. Single Black men have been convinced that the only struggle they have is a struggle for class, because as they achieve class, they can go into service of non-Black women. So as Black men engage in the fight to achieve class and ass, and Black women engage in the fight to assert that they are independent women, what happens to the Black family? Black men of marrying age don't realize that they were raised by feminist Black women, or their poor Black mothers are influenced greatly by radical feminism. Radical feminism goes far beyond equal rights for women. It's almost a testimony of how much women don't need men. A radical worldview that discounts the major importance and value of men is just as bad as a culture that oppresses or diminishes the role of women. It's tragic that so many young black women do not know the basics of the male-female relationship. If a man is made to feel that he is not needed and not respected, it's a guarantee that he will not be there. It is equally as tragic that there are so many young brothers who have been taught to focus exclusively on sexuality and superficial beauty instead of real, positive, beautiful characteristics that a good woman provides. I will admit that the pickings today are slim in America, but there are still many good young women, but most have unfortunately been raised to be radical feminists. Most of our young black men have been raised by their feminist or feminist sympathizing mothers, so we have a weak strain of black manhood in this country today. To make a relationship work with a young black woman, a black man must be strong in his value system. He must be strong enough to provide leadership and direction to his home. And he must be sure to be stable and productive in his relationship with his young black women of today. Only by healing our relationships with the African continent and our brothers and sisters who live there and other places within the vast African diaspora can we provide ourselves with a lifeline. Self-hating black American culture is on a respirator. It's dying. We see signs of it everywhere, and we have to do something about it. Without a radical change in the character of black people in America, 30 years from now, black America will be a thing of the past. Those of us who are reading the tea leaves and paying attention already know this. Many have begun thinking about planning their exodus back to our ancestral homeland, where we at least have a chance to build a world where we can thrive in. Back to Africa will soon become a top priority for a lot of people in black America who have the resources and the passport. Our group has no leadership in America that has a plan that focuses on us. No politician or clergyman in America can undo the horrible damage done to us by having every institution in this country attack the hearts and minds and thinking of black Americans. Ever since the gains of the civil rights movement, this country has been focused on menticide. Menticide, what is menticide? Well, it's a term coined by the late, great black psychologist, Dr. Bobby E. Wright, who explained over 40 years ago that menticide was a systemic destruction of a group's mind with the ultimate goal being the destruction of that group. Let me say that again. Menticide is the systematic destruction of a group's mind with the intention of destroying that group. This is where we are as black Americans, and this is where we've been for the last 40 years. We are no longer headed for self-destruction. Self-destruction has actually been achieved. Unless we make radical changes to the way we think in America, we will have proven the genius of the American social engineers. In the 20th century, many black leaders would say that America has a race problem. But in the 21st century, America has actually begun to solve her race problem. And the way she has solved it is by eliminating the race that has caused all the problems, as far as they're concerned. How diabolical are people who force you to build this country and then eliminate you by getting you to eliminate yourself through menticide? America has solved her race problem and absolved herself of any guilt. That's why she's ready to give you reparations, because it's meaningless. Without any kind of direction for our people, what good is reparations? We no longer exist as a people. So ultimately, this is our time to get our minds right. This is a time to put an end to self-hatred. The self-hatred that we're constantly being indoctrinated into while we live in this country. We as a people must make a radical break from the American brainwashing system. We must adopt an African worldview. If we're going to survive, we better rush back to a race-first philosophy or perish. We have a history that should unite us, but we don't study that history. We have lost compassion for ourselves as a group. So many resources have been invested in the mind control of black people. So many resources have been invested in the destruction of the black mind. So I want to make it clear that I'm not condemning any black American person who has fallen into the confusion and the traps set by the social engineers who control the thinking of our people. If these social engineers control our thinking, then they are responsible for our behavior. Because if you control minds, as Bobby E. Wright put it, if you control minds, you control behinds. They know they control us. Who are we kidding? The obsolescence of the black community has been planned and is being executed to perfection. So I have made this channel for those of us who know that there's a better way, for us to live a more meaningful life outside the pressure cooker of the ignorance we call the Black community. Now I invite you to participate in a new way of thinking that will set you free as you become a nation builder in this new age of a global African Renaissance. If we plan to stay in this country, we better get some unity fast. And if we don't get that unity, I advise everybody to book your passage back home to the motherland so we can at least fight on the continent our ancestors originate on. Thank you for listening. This is Brother C.C.Blackman. Please like and subscribe. And remember, it's African Renaissance time.